What's up, guys? This is Manoj Guptani. I welcome you all on behalf of the Edupedia world. It's a beautiful day outside, and certainly I do believe that you guys are enjoying your day to the fullest. So, guys, this is the 10th video presentation for the topic of equity analysis and valuation. By now, we have already covered our topics relating to equity analysis and a few chunks of valuation part as well. So, today I'm going to discuss with you one of the most exciting and important topics for equity valuation, and that will be present value valuation models. So, and then in this you'll be particularly like getting the concepts relating to two of the popular present value approach models of valuation. So you'll get to know about the same. So perfect. So before beginning, I should remind you your promise, and that was for regular revisions. Do keep revising your topics time and again. That will help you up during a final examination preparation. So that's quite imperative to go for regular and recurring kind of revision, guys. Don't skip on that front. Perfect. With this, let's start with the first topic, present value valuation models. So herein, I'll be discussing in this presentation two of them. One, dividend discount model, and second one, discounted cash flow approach. So we'll be talking about these two particular valuation models, wherein you'll be able to get an idea how present value valuation is being calculated and computed with the help of various models. The most popular one are these two, dividend discount model and discounted cash flow approach. So let's start with dividend discount model first and understand its basic intricacies and nuances as to how to move forward in this particular kind of case relating to dividend discount model. So first of all, dividend discount model. Dividend discount model basically from the perspective of any kind of shareholder who buys and holds the shares. So what should be the cash flows for him or her? It's simple. The cash flows he or she receives at any point of time are one, the dividends which are paid on it, and second, the market price of the share at that point. Let's suppose a person has purchased the share supposedly about 20 rupees. Okay. And today that particular stock is trading for like 50 rupees. So what's his basically perspective towards that particular stock? So he'll be having this kind of notion that he has already earned rupees 30 because he purchased something for rupees 20. Now the same is having the market value of as rupees 50. Apart from that, all those dividends which he has already received and will be receiving in future, that is also the kind of income that he'll be receiving or generating with the help of the purchase of that particular security. Right, guys? So from the perspective of any kind of shareholder who buys or holds a particular stock, the cash flows he or she receives at any point of time are the dividends which are paid on it, and secondly, the market price of that share at any point of time. So, the present value of a share is nothing but the future value of all the dividends which are receivable on that future. Okay, perfect. So, guys, there are basically three versions of this model which are used to determine the intrinsic value of a share of a stock. Okay, so by intrinsic value, I basically mean using your fundamental analysis to go for asking or generating or basically determining the true value, true worth of that stock, the intrinsic value of that stock. So there are three main models. One, constant dividend model, wherein there is no growth at all. Second, it's constant growth dividend model. Okay, and the third one is two-stage dividend growth model. Okay, so we'll be discussing each one of them one by one. So first of all, let's start with constant growth or no growth model. Okay, so guys, this is basically a kind of model which is generally used by the companies which have already settled in their particular segments, their spaces. So these are the large kind of honchos wherein they expect that we have already reached to a peak level and now there will be no growth in our areas. So basically they resort to this kind of dividend distribution model wherein they provide only the constant dividend. Okay. So you won't be having the kind of like growth in your dividends. They'll be like providing you each year 2 rupees, 3 rupees, 4 rupees, 5 rupees, or maybe 50, 100, depending upon the capacity of the company. But there won't be any kind of growth in this particular model. It will be like moving constantly across all its segments. So this is basically the constant dividend model wherein there is no growth. And the same can be calculated with the help of the pricing for the same would be D1, that is the kind of expected dividend, divided by KE. By KE, I mean the cost of equity or the expected return. What is your expectation while going for that particular stock? Okay. And by P, I mean the intrinsic value, the value of that share. So that can be computed with the help of using the dividend, dividing it by your expected kind of return, your required kind of return, or I should say the cost of equity. Whatever in case you get in the question paper, you can directly like divide this dividend, expected dividend, with the KE. So you will get the intrinsic value of that share. So this is basically constant dividend model approach wherein there is no growth at all. Okay. In comparison with that, the second one comes into the picture as constant growth dividend model. Okay. So this is a model wherein you will be receiving the growth each year. Okay, with time. So at year 1, if the dividend amount is rupees 2, so next year it will be like increasing to 10%, then 10%, then 10%, then 10%. So remember guys, why I am saying 10%, 10%, 10% and 10%, because here the growth is constant. Okay. The growth is not fluctuating year to year depending upon the profits or maybe depending upon the atmosphere of the economy or nothing like at all. Okay. So here the dividend growth is absolutely constant. That will move in the inclination with each other, the way the 10% at the starting, after a period of 10 years also, that will be 10% itself. Okay. This can be computed with the help of this. So herein P means the intrinsic value, D means expected dividend, and KE means the cost of equity. Okay, or the expected return, the same thing. Only G has been added over here. G means the constant dividend growth rate. Okay, so basically the constant dividend growth model is useful for mature kind of industries which are in steady state. Okay, where the dividend growth is expected to be stable and likely to be growing at a constant rate. Okay. Since the growth rate of dividend is expected to last forever, the company's other measures of performance too are expected to grow at the very similar kind of rate. Moreover, there is always an issue relating to what growth rate is reasonable as a stable growth rate. Ideally, guys, this has to be less than or equal to the growth rate of the economy in which the company operates. Extremely, this model is like extremely simple kind of stuff, but it is extremely sensitive for the inputs towards the growth rate. And if in case the same are used incorrectly, it can misleading and even absurd kind of results. Okay, so that's the kind of problem. It has to be taken care of very cautiously. Since as the growth rate converges on the discount rate, the value goes to infinity. So it is always best suited for the firms which are growing at a rate comparable to or lower than the nominal growth in the economy and which have like well established dividend payout policies that they intend to continue in infinite future as well. So that's the kind of growth model which is being adopted by these kind of companies. And the same is being taken care of very well by those. Okay. So the last one comes as two-stage dividend growth model. What is basically two-stage dividend growth model? I won't call it as just a two-stage dividend growth model. It is also a model wherein you will be like getting basically the growth rate in variable terms. Okay. So there might be a possibility that you like invest in any kind of company and that company provides you a dividend, let's say 10% or like 5% in first year. Okay. The same company provides you a dividend, let's say 8% next year. Okay. As per the growth rate is concerned. So next year they provide you a growth rate of like let's say 12% in a year. Okay. So this is basically what? This is basically variable dividend growth model. Okay. Or in order to simplify that, I have just taken up an example for two-stage dividend model. Okay. This is basically useful for the growing kind of businesses where the explicit period of dividend growth can be estimated. Okay. The first stage growth is extremely high growth phase for certain explicit period followed by the constant low growth till the end. And this basically works best for the firms which retain more and more and pay only residual amount as dividends. So the ones who are like practically emphasizing on the growth parameters more than providing you the dividend right on time. So this is basically the kind of model which is being used and implemented by those companies who are in their extreme growth phase and they want to grow as much as they can. So they don't rely more on providing you the dividends on time, rather they want to retain the profits so that they can take care of the investments in other investment opportunities. Okay. So the kind of first problem which we face over here in this particular model is defining the length of the explicit extraordinary growth period. Okay. Since that's a practical kind of stuff, right? So no more like theory won't be able to exemplify or exemplify this kind of example, because here and that is usually the kind of problem and obstacle which a practical world faces. So the first practical problem in this model is that it's defining of the explicit extraordinary growth period. Okay. And since the growth period is expected to decline to a very stable level after a particular period, the value of an investment will increase as this period is made longer and longer. That was a first extreme kind of problem. And the second problem with this model is basically lying in the assumption that growth rate is high during the initial period and is transformed overnight to a lower stable one at the end of the period. So, but in reality, the shift from high growth to stable growth happens gradually over time. So it doesn't happen overnight. So the only problem with the basic two problems with this particular two-stage dividend growth model is the first one, that it is extremely difficult to know about that explicit extraordinary growth period, when that will start and by when it should end. And secondly, the variable growth rate usually changes like drastically overnight. So that can happen, okay, by 1 year it was 8%, the next year it's 12%. Okay. So this basically happens in the real practical world slowly and gradually over time. So it doesn't happen like, okay, suddenly. So, but this is the particular con with this particular growth model, dividend growth model, wherein they assume that the same thing is actually happening drastically rather than going for gradually. Okay. So these are the basic two problems which it faces. And finally, this model actually can give us very skewed kind of estimates for a firm, which gives lower payout when they afford to pay more. So this is basically the kind of problem. And henceforth, like, we will underestimate the value of the firm in that case that accumulate cash and pay out too little on dividends. Let's suppose I have a company again, and I am generating immense kind of revenues. Okay. However, having said that, I am paying pretty less of an amount to my investors, my shareholders as dividends. Okay. And I am retaining more and more with myself so that I can explore some better growth opportunities for myself. Okay. If in case only dividend part is taken into consideration, what people will think about my company, that my company is actually not doing very well because I'm not paying much of the dividends, right? So since I'm not paying good dividends, so how can this two-stage dividend growth model will provide you the actual real kind of intrinsic value for my particular share? Because you are just taking into consideration only dividends, right? So you are not taking into consideration the kind of retained earnings that I am retaining with myself in order to take care of my further growth opportunities. So herein, that's the problem with this particular concept, this particular model. It usually underestimates the value of the firm because it takes care the kind of cash which is being accumulated and the ones which are paying too little kind of dividends. So that's the kind of problem of underestimation with the value of the firm in that case. So basically, if I like to provide you the concept with this particular crux of this model, that will be that the two-stage model usually allows for separate valuation for two distinct periods in a company's future. Okay, this approach can accommodate life cycle effects. It can also avoid the difficulties which are posed when the initial growth rate is usually higher than the discount rate. And this two-stage model allows for the initial period or of over above the sustainable growth. So that's the kind of thing which is happening over here. And it allows the analyst to make use of his or her expectations as to when the growth may shift to a more sustainable level. A weakness of all the dividend discounting models or dividend growth models is that they are all very sensitive to the input values. So the kind of input values which you are using in order to extract out the final intrinsic value, that will be depending upon that. So if in case you take up the growth rate as 8% and actually the growth rate is lying as 12%, so definitely that is going to impact the intrinsic value of that particular stock. Okay, so it is extremely important that if you are inputting the values in the system, that should be on the basis of the real practical scenarios rather than going for some of the hypothetical ways. So it has to be taken care of. And small changes in K or G can imply basically large chances of inestimated intrinsic value. So that's the kind of problem which is usually faced over here. And these inputs are difficult to measure in that case. So guys, that was all about two-stage dividend growth model. Herein, this is the basic concept for the same. So herein, this P means the intrinsic value, the present value of all the dividends plus the present value of the price, which will be absorbed over here. D, by D1, D2, I mean the expected dividends. By KE, I mean the cost of equity. Okay. And by G, that is growth. It is G1 basically means the initial dividend growth rate. G2 basically means the steady dividend growth rate that will that will move till infinity. So that's how this formula is being taken care of while providing the concept clarity. So I guess you guys got the complete clarity as to how this particular dividend discount model is usually working. What's constant dividend model, what's constant growth dividend model, and what's two-stage dividend growth model or variable stage growth model. So that's how this particular dividend discount model usually works. We'll be studying this in more depth as well. So I have like provided you with the immense kind of clarity as to how this is likely to be moved forward. However, having said that, I'll still make sure that you guys do understand the remaining, the very few portions which will be like covered in a particular segment, which will be the dividend valuation chapter, wherein I'll be briefly exemplifying you, making you understand the concepts relating to the dividend decision, how usually a dividend decision is being taken care of by the company. So we'll be discussing that in my next chapter. Well, whenever I'll be taking care of this dividend decision and valuation models. So this is particularly dividend discount model. So now let's move to our next topic of the day, and that will be discounted cash flow approach. So guys, what does a discounted cash flow approach basically means? Let's understand the same first in order to further understand the kind of process it takes to get the dividend discounted cash flow finally. So discounted cash flow valuation is actually based upon the notion that the value of an asset is the present value of all the expected cash flows on that asset discounted at a rate that reflects the riskiness of those cash flows. So guys, this thing is basically like discussed upon time again and again. The discounted cash flow valuation is basically depending upon the notion that the value of the asset is actually all the present value of the expected cash flows that that particular asset will be generating towards infinity till the time it survives, and discounting the same with the rate that is like cost of equity or maybe cost of debt or maybe like cost of overall funds which are being taken care of. So this is basically the kind of approach that takes into place with the help of discounted cash flow valuation. Okay, so the rate which usually reflects the riskiness of those cash flows. So by discounting rate, I simply mean the kind of expectation that you have. Okay, so the kind of expected return, expected rate on that, or I should say the discounting rate, or I should say the cost of equity. It could be anything. Okay, the main thing is your expectation with this particular phase. Okay, so if in case you are like generating 2 rupees in first year, and the same 2 rupees is being generated in the second year. However, in first year, the discounting rate was 1 because it's you are having the 2 rupees in your hand even today. Okay. After 1 year, when you will be receiving 2 rupees, the value of that 2 rupees won't be the one which is the value for 2 rupees today. Okay. So whatever you will be like able to take up or purchase from 2 rupees today, you won't be able to purchase the same with 2 rupees next year because that will the true value of that money will be like depreciating, and certainly the prices will increase with time. Okay, so that is why this particular expectation rate is usually like subtracted while going for a particular expectation of the cash flows. So first year it will be 2 rupees, next year it will be 2 rupees divided by your expectation rate, another year that will be 2 rupees divided by your expectation rate to the power 2. So that will go on, so on, and that way. So this is particularly what discounted cash flow approach usually tells you. The nature of the cash flows will depend upon various factors relating to the particular asset. So it would be 1, dividends for an equity share. It should be 2, coupons, bond valuation. Remember guys, the major first chapter we took. Third, the redemption value of the bonds. That was also being taken care of in the same chapter. And the fourth one, post-tax cash flows of a project. So these are the major cash flows which will be generated depending on various type of assets. So for equity share, it should be dividend. Coupons will relate to bonds and debentures, and redemption value of the bonds will, like as the word is saying, so it will depend upon the bonds. And finally, the post-tax cash flows of the project, that will be like depending upon the bonds as well. So this particular cash flows will be depending upon the nature of the asset in which you are actually investing. Third, the approach is based on time value concept. Remember guys, that is what I was telling you over here. So where the value of an asset is the present value of its expected future cash flows. Okay, so That is to be taken care of. So discounting, basically the word discounting involves in itself the time value concept. Wherever, remember, if you will be like remembering the time when you read about this topic in FM, that was payback period. Okay. So payback period usually used to be, okay, you have invested like 5 lakh rupees in a particular security. Okay. And you'll be like receiving 1 lakh rupees each year. So what is the payback period? It would be simply 5 years, because 1 lakh, 1 lakh, 1 lakh, 1 lakh, 1 lakh. Okay. So that will be 5. That was simple payback period. Okay. But in case of discounted payback period, the same used to be like discounted with a particular expected rate or discounting rate. So that was likely to be like 12%, 10%, 8% usually. Okay. So herein, if you will be like applying the discounted rate, so in certainty, that particular payback period will be longer in that case, because you will not be considering this 1 lakh which you will be receiving after a period of 1 year as 1 lakh, because the same will be discounted to a rate, and that will come to something like rupees 90,000 something something something. The next year it will be like 80,000 something something something. Again the next year it will be like 70,000 something something something. So by in order to achieve or like get paid entire 5 lakh, you'll be like having to wait for a period more than 5 years. So that was what discounted payback period. The same is the case with this particular concept as well. So this is discounted cash flows. So if you'll be like taking care of cash flows, like particular cash flows, constant cash flows, that will be like 1 lakh, 1 lakh, 1 lakh. Okay. But if in case you'll be considering the discounted one, so that will take more time. Okay. So this is basically concept which is based on the time value concept, where the value of any asset is the present value of all its expected future cash flows. So guys, that was brief about this particular concept of discounted cash flow approach. Okay. Now let's understand the main thing, and that is the steps which are being involved in discounted cash flow approach. So how to move about the same. So in this particular segment, we'll be discussing about that. So these are the major steps in which you'll be able to extract the discounted cash flow approach with the help of these following steps. First one comes into the picture as estimating the free cash flows for the explicit forecast period. Okay. So guys, this is a first and the foremost kind of step which is likely to be taken care of while going for any kind of discounted cash flow approach. The free cash flows usually represent the cash flow which is available to all the suppliers of the capital of the firm. These include equity holders, preference shareholders, debt holders, and so on. So the free cash flow basically is the gross cash flow of the firm, and we'll be like subtracting taxes out of it, investments out of it, changes in the net working capital out of it, and we'll be adding back the depreciation and non-cash charges into it. Remember guys, we did discuss about that topic in my last presentation. Perfect. And so in that case, the financing basically is not incorporated in the cash flows. Suitable kind of adjustments for specific financing have to be like made in any kind of discount rate. So it has to be taken of care that way. So estimation of the free cash flows for the explicit forecast period is essential and imperative while moving forward towards disclosing the discounted cash flow value. So that's the first and the foremost step, wherein you'll be able to get the estimated free cash flow, which has been like already taken care of in my various previous presentations. Okay. Next thing comes into the picture as estimating a suitable discount rate for the acquisition. Okay. So whenever you go for any kind of acquisition, you take care of a suitable kind of discount rate. Perfect guys. So that is the second most important step, which involves the computation of the cost of capital to the firm. The cost of capital is basically the rate which is used for discounting the free cash flows to the present values. The cost of capital is to be computed as the weighted average cost of all the sources of capital, which are based on the market value of each of the components of the capital. So this is how basically it is taken care of. So if I'll have to like provide you the formula, the kind of concept with which you can derive a suitable kind of discount rate. So that will be simply KO. KO means basically the cost of overall capital. Okay. It's equal to the KE, cost of equity, into the kind of weight that it's having. Okay. The kind of market value that equity is having, dividing by the total market value of the firm, plus the cost of preference share capital into the preference share market value, preference share capital's market value, dividing by the overall market value of the firm, plus the cost of debt. Now we'll be taking care of debt in that case, into 1 minus tax, because that is tax deducting kind of item. So we'll be taking only the base amount for that. So 1 minus tax into the market value of the debt dividing by the market value of the overall firm. So by this case, we'll be like able to get the overall cost of capital for the firm, entire firm, taking into account the KE, weighted average of KE, weighted average of KP, that is cost of preference share capital, and weighted average of KD, that is cost of debt. Okay, so by this means you'll be able to take care of the overall cost of capital in that case. And if in that case, guys, if the acquirer who is actually valuing the firm intends to change the capital structure of the target company, then suitable adjustments will be made for the discounting rate as likely to be made as well. So it has to be taken care of. For example, if I like provide you a case of like ABC company. Okay, so if ABC company is having cost of equity share capital as 12.5%, cost of debt as 8%, and tax rate is basically 33%. So we can simply go for about like calculating the same with the help of these values, wherein that this particular overall cost of capital would be 12.5 into the kind of weight it is having plus 8.8 into 1 minus 33 into the kind of weight it is having divided by the overall value of the company. So wherein we'll be able to get computation and calculation for overall cost of capital. Okay, so this is basically the second step, that is important one, in order to estimate the suitable kind of discount rate for the acquisition. The third thing comes into the picture as calculation of the present value of the cash flows for the explicit forecasting period. Okay, so guys, one of the premises of this particular approach is that the firm is in going concern. Okay, the implication of this assumption is that the cash flows is in perpetuity, needs to be discounted to the value of the firm. This is, however, like impossible in practice. I'll be like very frank with you. Hence, like cash flows are explicitly computed for a finite kind of period of time, which is known as the explicit forecast period. And the continuing value of the firm at the end of such period is computed, which is known as usually terminal value. Okay. The forecast period is set in such a way that the company reaches to a stable phase or steady kind of state, wherein at the end of this particular forecast period and the growth rate remains constant in perpetuity. So that's how it's being done. So with this kind of methodology, you can simply go for about calculating the present value of the cash flows for the explicit forecast period, which is not infinite, but kind of like going about infinite. Okay. Next comes the fourth phase, which is the estimation of the terminal value. Terminal value is basically the present value of the cash flows occurring after the forecasting period. That's the end value. Okay, the kind of value that you will be receiving at the end of the explicit forecasting period. So that's how this terminal value actually mean, and the same can be computed with the help of a basic concept, that is cash flows in the last year. The last year cash flow multiplied by 1 plus G. So by G I mean the growth rate, dividing by KE minus G. By KE I mean the cost of equity minus growth rate. So with that help, you'll be like able to find out the terminal value of any kind of company. Okay, so that is how terminal value is being like computed over here. Next comes the fifth one as determination of the value of the firm. After obtaining all the results for the estimation of the free cash flows, estimating a suitable discount rate, calculating the PV out of the cash flows for the explicit forecast period, and finally estimating the terminal value, you will be like able to determine the value of the firm. So that's the kind of thing which you'll be like providing in the fifth step, taking care of all the four steps which are already been accomplished. And finally, you'll be subtracting the value of the debt from all this value of the firm. So you'll have to subtract the value of the debt and other kind of obligations, assuming that the acquirer needs to arrive at a particular value of equity. Okay, and with this method, you will be like able to get the final value for the buyer, and that will be, if in simple term I should say, so it should be value of the seller plus value which is being added by the buyer plus the changes in the value to a buyer if the target firm is acquired by the competitor. So that's how it is being done, and it should be noted that the final price which is paid by the buyer might be higher than the estimate which is being arrived by the discounted cash flow method. That's usually depending upon the negotiation power of both the companies and in whose favor basically this acquisition goes on. So that will be their discretion. However, this method usually provides you the final value, the kind of value of acquisition that simply should have been. So that's the kind of steps which are being involved in discounted cash flow approach. I do believe that you guys got an entire clarity as to both the concepts, how they work, because these are some of the most popular kind of present value evaluation models, dividend discount model and discounted cash flow approach. So do revise these topics on time, guys, because that will help you in remembering as to what I told you. So do revise the same on time and regular and recurring kind of revisions. I'll be seeing you in my next forthcoming presentation with various topics relating to equity analysis and valuation. So I'll be taking care of the remaining topics in my forthcoming presentations. Till then, I'll be concluding my video with a dose of motivation, and that will be, no matter how many goals you have achieved, you must set your sights on a higher one. Jessica Savage was the one who did mention this quote. So it's a usual, regular human nature and human tendency. So you've like already dreamt of a dream, you achieved it. So what's the second target? Okay, go dream for some other thing now. So that should be a habit. So you have like after clearing a CA final, you should set your aim with some of the great kind of growth, good job opportunities. So that should be second target, right? No matter like how many goals have you like actually achieved in your life, you must set your sights on a higher one. Day in, day out, try and fulfilling your dreams and set your sights on a new higher one. So that will keep you moving in the right direction. You won't stop anywhere around. Okay. Life is too short to take care of many of the things in life. So always dream about something bigger and better. Always. Perfect, guys. With this, I'll say a thank you on behalf of the Edupedia world. Keep interacting via questions, queries in the comment boxes. Stay connected. That will help us in understanding your needs way better. And that will help us in providing you a better kind of facilities with the help of these videos. Perfect, guys. Love you all. Take care. God bless you.